Rain hammered aggressively against the windshield as Daniel Ross drove through the dark, empty highway, the wipers barely keeping up. It was supposed to be the final night of his week-long business trip, but meetings ended earlier than expected. And for the first time in days, he was excited to surprise his wife. A smile formed on his face until his phone buzzed. At first, he ignored it, but curiosity pulled his eyes to the screen. The message wasn't from any saved contact. The number was unfamiliar. His heart dropped as he read the text. Can't wait until he's gone again. Tonight is ours. His stomach twisted violently. His hands shook on the steering wheel as dozens of possibilities flashed through his mind, each darker than the last. The closer he got to home, the heavier his breathing became. Not with anger, but with heartbreak and denial, by the time Daniel reached his driveway, he could barely breathe. His house stood silent and dark from the outside, but as soon as he stepped inside, he noticed something different. Soft music playing faintly from the bedroom upstairs. The doormat was slightly moved, and there were 2 wine glasses on the living room table. His throat tightened. A part of him begged to turn around, to run away before confirming the truth, but another part, the broken but determined part, forced him to move forward. He pulled out his phone and hit record, desperate to capture proof of whatever was happening. Each step up the stairs felt heavier than the last. Finally, he pushed open the bedroom door, and time froze. Ashley, his wife, lay tangled with another man in their bed, smiling until the moment she saw Daniel. Her expression shifted instantly from pleasure to panic. While Daniel stood paralyzed, shattered, the man scrambled to grab his clothes and bolted past Daniel, without even looking at him, leaving the room in chaos. Ashley didn't rush to explain or apologize. Instead, her face twisted in anger, as if Daniel were a problem. If you were actually present in this marriage, maybe I wouldn't have needed someone else, she yelled, turning the blame onto him without hesitation. Daniel dropped to his knees, hands trembling, unable to form words. He couldn't understand how she could look at him, not with guilt, but with resentment. While he sat broken on the floor, Ashley frantically grabbed her phone and dialed her mother. "Mom, come immediately. Daniel ruined everything," she cried, acting like she was a victim. Daniel watched her back as she spoke. The woman he loved suddenly felt like a stranger, cold and merciless. In the beginning, Daniel and Ashley were the couple people envied. Their love felt cinematic. Spontaneous road trips at midnight, handwritten notes on mirrors, stolen kisses in grocery aisles. They married quickly, driven by passion rather than planning. And for the first few years, it felt perfect. But over time, cracks formed, not from fights, but from silence. Ashley became less affectionate, her eyes drifting to her phone during conversations, her laughter reserved for friends, never for Daniel anymore. Date nights became excuses, intimacy became routine, and love turned into habit. Daniel kept trying, planning surprises, booking vacations, writing long messages, but each time she responded with coldness. Ashley started sleeping facing the opposite direction, and every small disagreement became about how he wasn't good enough. What once felt like a partnership slowly transformed into an emotional battlefield, where Daniel was always losing to Daniel's desperation to fix the marriage came from a deeper place than simply loving Ashley. It came from a lifetime of fearing abandonment. Orphaned young, shuffled through foster homes, he learned to earn love through compliance rather than confidence. Every time someone left, he blamed himself, believing if he just tried harder, loved harder, behaved better, they would stay. So when Ashley started pulling away, those childhood wounds resurfaced. Instead of confronting her, he internalized everything, thinking he needed to be more perfect, more supportive, more patient, more forgiving, anything to keep her from leaving him like everyone else had. He didn't notice the difference between love and dependency because he equated sacrifice with worth. To Daniel, marriage wasn't just a relationship. It was the first family he ever had, and he would rather break himself and lose it. Ashley's mother, Margaret, played a quiet but corrosive role throughout their marriage. From day one, she made it clear that Daniel wasn't good enough, not wealthy enough, not prestigious enough, not born into the right family. Daniel responded by working harder, earning more, and financially supporting not only Ashley but Margaret too, hoping one day to earn acceptance. Instead, Margaret used his generosity as a weapon. Every time Ashley mistreated Daniel, Margaret justified her behavior, feeding her daughter's entitlement while quietly draining Daniel's bank account and self-worth. Friends tried to warn him, reminding him that love shouldn't require servitude. But Daniel kept believing that if he gave enough, if he endured enough, he would finally be wanted. In reality, his vulnerability didn't inspire love. It made him easy to control. To Margaret and Ashley, Daniel wasn't a husband. He was a resource. Margaret entered the house in a rush, her face sculpted into an expression of outrage and concern, as if she were the one betrayed. She wrapped her arms around Daniel, repeating loudly that what Ashley did was unacceptable, her tone theatrical rather than sincere. Every sentence sounded like it was being performed, as if she wanted witnesses that she was on Daniel's side. She pressured Ashley to apologize, lecturing her daughter about loyalty, responsibility, and commitment. Ashley begrudgingly muttered a shallow apology, but her cold eyes showed no remorse. Daniel could feel the disconnect. The room was full of words, yet empty of emotions. Margaret kept emphasizing that the family must stick together, and that they shouldn't make impulsive decisions. Something in her voice felt eerie, rehearsed, like keeping Daniel close wasn't about love. But the room became heavy. Whatever they were hiding wasn't just financial. Daniel suddenly realized that Ashley's betrayal was only a surface wound. Underneath it lay a decades-old secret, tied to Margaret's past and Ashley's identity. When Daniel stepped outside, he wasn't just a heartbroken husband anymore. He was a man who needed answers, not revenge. The betrayal transformed into obsession. He had lost love, dignity, and trust, but he refused to lose the truth. Whatever Margaret was hiding, it terrified her more than divorce. And that alone made Daniel determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. After filing for divorce, Daniel decided facts were the only thing that could protect him, so he hired a private investigator. What he expected was proof of a recent affair. What he received instead was a nightmare. Ashley had been cheating for nearly 4 years, long before the emotional distance, long before she blamed him for not being present. The PI also revealed something more devastating. Daniel's bank records showed large withdrawals throughout the marriage, all signed legally by Margaret under a power of attorney Daniel had forgotten she persuaded him to sign years earlier. Every time he worked late or took extra contracts thinking he was supporting the family, he was unknowingly funding the people preparing to destroy him. The betrayal wasn't emotional anymore. It was financial, legal, and systemic. Daniel realized he hadn't lost control of his life suddenly. It had been stolen piece by piece over years. Things became worse when Margaret went on the offensive. To maintain control of the narrative, she began spreading lies to relatives, neighbors, and even Daniel's workplace, accusing him of abusing Ashley emotionally and financially. People who had once praised Daniel now avoided him. Friends stopped answering his calls. His business partners became distant, calling emergency meetings to question his behavior and mental stability. Ashley filed legal motions claiming she contributed to Daniel's business and was entitled to half. Every courtroom scene felt like a funeral for the life Daniel built. He wasn't only losing money, he was losing his identity. Years of love, commitment, sacrifice, and loyalty were rewritten into a false story where he was a villain. At home, the silence became unbearable. Depression took over. Panic attacks at night, breakdowns in the shower, and a desperate question repeating in his mind. Why am I never enough for anyone? Just when Daniel believed he had reached his lowest point, the private investigator called with an update that didn't just change the case. It changed Daniel's entire life. The PI had found a connection between Margaret and Daniel's biological past. Decades earlier, Margaret had a relationship with Daniel's biological father, the man Daniel never met, the man whose face he couldn't even remember. Records showed they lived in the same city when Daniel was conceived. A chilling possibility formed. Margaret had known exactly who Daniel was from the beginning. She hadn't judged him for being unworthy. She had targeted him. For reasons that were still unclear, the betrayal expanded beyond a marriage. It reached into Daniel's identity, his origin, his very existence. His heartbreak turned into purpose. Whatever secret Margaret was hiding was tied not only to money, but to his own bloodline. The PI's investigation pushed Daniel toward a decision he never imagined making: a DNA test. Not for the divorce case, not for revenge, but for truth. When the laboratory results finally arrived, Daniel sat his car for nearly an hour before opening them. His hands trembling harder than the night he found Ashley cheating. The first page confirmed Margaret was his biological mother. His stomach turned, and the world seemed to spin. But the second page destroyed everything left standing. Ashley and Daniel shared the same father, making them biological half-siblings. Rage, disgust, grief, and nausea crashed through him all at once. He realized Margaret hadn't been trying to keep him in the family. She'd been trying to use him. She gave him up as a baby because he ruined her glamorous life, then brought him back into the family when he became wealthy. Daniel wasn't chosen out of love. He was selected for profit. A.S. Daniel pieced the timeline together. The horrifying puzzle finally became clear. Margaret never disapproved of him. She recognized him. She had tracked him for years after he became successful and manipulated Ashley into pursuing him. Ashley believed she was falling in love naturally, but in reality, Margaret groomed her daughter to marry Daniel for financial inheritance. The plan was calculated. Build the marriage, groom Ashley to cheat, then divorce him publicly while taking his assets as revenge for abandoning her decades ago, even though Margaret was the one who abandoned him. Daniel realized he hadn't simply been betrayed as a husband. He had been preyed on since childhood. Every fight, every insult, every silent dinner was an emotional failure. It was choreography. He wasn't unlucky in love. He was targeted like prey, used by the very woman who should have protected him before he was even born. The climax came during the divorce hearing. Daniel arrived calm, not screaming, not shaking, just ready to end the lie. When the judge asked if he had anything to submit before settlement, Daniel handed the envelope containing the DNA test. The room froze as the evidence was displayed. Margaret's face went pale first. Then she collapsed into sobs, clawing at him, begging him not to expose her, whispering that she can't lose everything again. Ashley stared at the document like it was written in another language before erupting into hysterical screams. Not because she cheated, but because she discovered she had been manipulated into marrying her half-brother for money. Attorneys, spectators, and court officers stood in stunned silence as the weight of the truth burned through the room. There was no victory, only devastation. The judge could barely speak. A lifetime of lies detonated in a single moment. After the courtroom explosion, Daniel stood at a crossroads, one path fueled by rage and destruction, the other by truth and accountability. He chose justice, not vengeance. Instead of retaliating emotionally or publicly humiliating them further, he allowed the legal system to speak for him. He submitted the DNA results, the financial records, and the PIs for the first time in his life. He chose himself without guilt or apology. The cycle of trauma ended, not by violence, but by truth that in the weeks that followed. The truth spread through his community and workplace like wildfire. People who had once distanced themselves slowly approached him with apologies. Some sincere, some shallow, but Daniel no longer needed validation. His business regained stability. Clients returned, his partners reinstated him, and his reputation was restored. But beneath the victories, he knew something deeper needed healing, the part of him that believed love must be earned through pain. He began therapy not because he was broken, but because he was ready to rebuild. Session by session, he unpacked years of abandonment, rejection, and self-sacrifice. He learned that love isn't something he must bleed for. It's something he deserves without conditions. For the first time, Daniel started waking up without heaviness in his chest. The world felt quiet, but not empty, peaceful. Healing didn't happen overnight. Some mornings Daniel cried without knowing why. Some nights he felt echoes of old fears. But he didn't run from them anymore. He faced them. He traveled, made new friends, reconnected with hobbies he once abandoned, and slowly rebuilt a version of himself that didn't exist for approval or acceptance. He learned to enjoy his own company. Coffee at sunrise, long walks, books without distraction, quiet spaces without anxiety. He no longer tried to prove his worth to anyone. In time, he opened his heart again, not to someone else but to himself. Standing in the doorway of his home months later, he looked around not with loneliness, but with gratitude. His life was no longer defined by abandonment or betrayal. It was defined by resilience, the love he spent his whole life begging for. He finally gave himself 1 year later, The sun was warm, not blazing, not harsh, just gentle in a way Daniel had forgotten sunlight could feel. He stood in a quiet cemetery, surrounded by trees that swayed with the breeze. In front of him rested a brand-new headstone with the name of his biological father. After months of searching, he had finally discovered who the man was. Not a hero, not a villain. Simply a man who made mistakes and never got the chance to undo them. Daniel didn't come for closure or forgiveness, but to speak the final truth of his own story. With calm, steady hands, he placed a plaque beneath the name, engraved by his choice alone. I'm not broken. I survived. It wasn't a victory against the past. It was acceptance of it. For the first time, Daniel didn't feel abandoned. He felt whole as Daniel stood in silence. Footsteps approached from behind. He turned and saw Sarah, the single mother he met in his support group months earlier, carrying flowers. Her daughter, a little girl full of sunlight and curiosity, ran ahead and wrapped her small arms around Daniel's leg without hesitation. The contact surprised him, not because it was sudden, but because it felt safe. Sarah smiled gently, the kind of smile that didn't demand anything in return. They had grown close over months, not through romantic sparks or dramatic gestures, but through shared healing. Two broken people choosing to rebuild quietly. Sarah placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder and said the words he had spent a lifetime needing but never receiving. You don't have to earn love. You deserve it. In that moment, the loneliness that once lived inside him loosened its grip. Daniel didn't rush the moment or hide from it. He simply breathed, deeply, fully, letting the warmth settle into a place that had been cold for so long. The little girl reached for his hand, and Daniel instinctively took it, not with fear, but with quiet gratitude. Sarah walked beside them, not as a replacement for love lost, but as a reminder that love can still grow, gently, respectfully, freely. As they walked out of the cemetery together, Daniel didn't look back because he didn't need to. His past no longer chased him. It simply existed behind him while life waited ahead. He wasn't healed perfectly, no one ever is, but he was healing. And for the first time in his life, the future didn't feel terrifying. It felt possible.